6:36 is the studio time. I promised you a conversation with an activist who possibly knows way more, very much more intimately about this movement than I do. And of course, the anniversary of that very, very, can I call it pivotal case with regards to LGBTIQ rights in Botswana. Now, Bradley is currently the LGBTIQ plus sex work and disability program officer at the Southern African Litigation Center. And Bradley works there supporting grassroots organizations across Southern Africa. Bradley is a social justice activist with over 10 years of experience in program design and strategic management, specifically focusing on developing, implementing and strengthening LGBTIQ plus led movements. Bradley's worked with several civil society organizations in Botswana and has co-created intersectional advocacy initiatives. His focus is on building and strengthening communities on human rights development as a guiding principle to enable active participation of queer-led movements in socio-economic, political and systemic inclusion with a keen interest in the global south. Bradley, it is such a pleasure to have you join me today. It is quite a big day, I think, in terms of, some of the milestones, some of the dates. Perhaps as I start off my conversation with you, can I get you to give us a bit of background and deeper understanding as to the actual day, the 29th of November, 2021, where the Court of Appeal decriminalized consensual sex between same-sex partners? Take me through a little bit of the background and give us a deeper understanding.
Well, firstly, thank you so much, Kathy, for inviting me to this platform, and a good evening to everyone listening. This definitely is a amazing day, not only for the LGBTIQ community, but I think for human rights in Botswana. I'll just, as a quick background, I think the day that we are commemorating today, which is the decriminalization of consensual same-sex sexual relations in Botswana, as upheld by the Court of Appeal last year, basically was, another reaffirmation of LGBTIQ human rights, the need for LGBTIQ individuals to belong in Botswana and are part of the society of Botswana. As a brief background, and I think we can't talk about LGBTIQ rights if we don't talk about where we came from. And a lot of this, there's like several baselines that sort of sparked this trajectory for decrim rather. I think as far as the late 2000s, when we had one of the first cases, the Kanani case, and this was two individuals who were tried under the penal codes, Botswana section 164, section 165, and 167, which basically spoke to any person who is caught attempting or in the act of carnal knowledge against the order of nature shall be liable to imprisonment or a fine, right? And I think just to break that part down also, over the years also, and we sort of have also been trying to work with the judiciary, with various stakeholders to understand what does when we say carnal knowledge against the order of nature, how is that understood? And a common understanding really was consensual sex or sexual activities between two consenting adults that results in reproduction. So if two consenting adults are engaging in sexual activities that result in an offspring per se. And that's it. So for us also, it was the understanding was this does not only affect the LGBTIQ communities, but everyone else, right? So loosely breaking it down also, it was any consensual activity that people do that does not result in one having a baby. So whether it is kissing, whether it is any other act, right? I think we are on a PG show now.
No. Keep it family friendly.
Yeah. So kissing, hugging, like foreplay, all those acts that don't result in one falling pregnant, basically. And a lot of times, because of this, LGBTIQ people were often subjected or threatened to be arrested, right? And tried under this section of the penal code, which in our line of working, and this has often been found to be sort of like the cornerstone, foundation, the bedrock of stigma, discrimination, exclusion of the LGBTIQ communities in Botswana. And for us, it was also saying, so how do we address that? Several miles gains have been done so far, including the registration of Lekhabibo in 2016, where the Court of Appeal had affirmed that everyone deserves the right to their fundamental rights of freedom of expression, association, and assembly. So that also, in a way, sort of sparked that, like the number of gains that we have seen being done, especially in judgments by the court, by the Botswana courts. So that basically is the background. And for us, when we then had embarked on decrim, and this was LGBTIQ activists, human rights defenders, Lekhabibo was involved, the Southern African Litigation Center was involved, but at the core of that really was LGBTIQ communities who, and in my view also, had put themselves in the forefront in terms of showing explicitly how these sections sort of infringe our fundamental rights, to the rights to dignity, the rights to privacy, and so forth. And throughout the years, we have also collected several stories, testimonials, evidence really to sort of show how these sections keep on promoting, excluding, sidelining LGBTIQ people and making us prone to various kinds of human rights violations. Yeah.
But let's do this. Let's start talking about the wins. Let's talk those highlights, those milestones in the years that has been since, it officially, because I know there was an appeal and then Court of Appeal sort of, legalized it, put the final stamp on it. What are some of the wins that we've had in the years since then for the LGBTIQ community?
Yeah. So in 2019, the High Court of Appeal actually ruled in favor of the LGBTIQ community.
Yes.
Citing that everyone in Botswana do deserve their rights to equality, to liberty, to non-discrimination, more privacy. And, for us, I think that was a very, very big win, which we then moments later then, the government had then appealed this decision, and that's how we had ended up in the Court of Appeal, which in November 2001 had upheld that decision. So for us, that was a big win in the sense that it really had promoted what we had always wanted, to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized, and sort of given a push towards looking for further rights towards inclusion. And not only in the courts, but in society also, and in movement building, we've seen a lot of visibility, expansion, growth of the LGBTIQ community. We've seen collectives form and do events such as the Pride events. We've seen collectives form and register and continue doing a lot of visibility, education, awareness towards the community on LGBTIQ issues. I think also one of the biggest milestones that we've seen is how this judgment has also had an impact regionally, because it has been cited in various cases in courts outside of Botswana, including Eswatini in Kenya. It has also inspired other countries, other communities in the region to also start challenging their penal codes that criminalize their beings. Right now we see countries such as Namibia, Mauritius also challenging these colonial laws that have sidelined LGBTIQ people. And I think for me also one of the biggest highlight, was how in terms of the advocacy that was done, it was not done in a one movement lens per se, but sort of taking it from an intersectional view. So the advocacy that was done was to say, look, everyone deserves fundamental rights, and there are a number of people in society who are sidelined, and including women, including people with disabilities, young adolescent girls and women, who on a daily struggle to various socio-economic issues, including access to land, to clean water, to employment, who are prone to arbitrary arrest. It's hard for transgender communities to also change their gender markers. So sort of bringing all those struggles that brought all of us together as various vulnerable communities was a way to strengthen solidarity, which we've seen play out now also, because now we also see various communities supporting each other. We see various individuals, such as the trans communities, even challenging their rights to recognition, to affirmation. Yeah.
But let me ask you this, Bradley, in terms of some of the challenges that have happened and also just the gaps, where do they exist, especially with regards to the LGBTIQ community and human rights, hella, as a whole and in general?
I think in addressing gaps, there are issues that we also have to address as a society. Fundamentalism in culture, in religion, patriarchy, heteronormativity, and these are concepts that people throw around a lot, but it manifests daily. And those are like big challenges that are still there within our communities, which has also led to a lot of exclusionary measures. For example, access to targeted health services is still a big challenge for LGBTIQ communities. And even within that, it's still a challenge for transgender communities. There's still a high number of sexual, physical, verbal violence that LGBTIQ communities face. Right now, we are commemorating 16 days of activism against women and children. And a gap that we see happen year in, year out also is how government responds to that. And where I'm going also is saying not doing campaigns in an inclusive manner. Everything is always done in a heteronormative manner, which continues to sideline other groups and make them more vulnerable to all these types of violences, sexual violence, physical violence, which in turn also makes it hard to report because of the stigma of discrimination that people still face from society, especially when they have to report cases. Yeah.
Bradley, let's close off our conversation and talk about World Human Rights Day. I believe it happens on the 10th of December, if I'm not mistaken. Talk to me about what that means, and I want to just perhaps get you to specify, Jorge, in terms of the LGBTIQ community, what does that day mean?
Yeah, I mean, with commemorating Human Rights Day, I think this year will be the 75th of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and for a lot of countries, that also feeds into the Constitution to say everyone deserves the right to be protected, to equality, and so forth. And I think for the LGBTIQ community, that is what we need. That is what young women need. That is what all vulnerable groups need: protection, equality before the law. And how does this look like? It's inclusion of LGBTIQ issues in every form, on every table, in whether it is in the judiciary, whether it is having a whole array of health services that is affordable, that is accessible to LGBTIQ people, having curriculums that are inclusive of LGBTIQ issues, even having the school environment, safe spaces for LGBTIQ students. Unlike what we've seen happen a couple of weeks ago, where lesbian women were expelled from school, but the school environment being supportive and nurturing of diversity, really. And I think really that the whole essence also of commemorating Human Rights Day is to say that justice, the fight for justice really shouldn't be delayed, because that also puts a hold on the lives, on the dignity of various groups, LGBTIQ groups, women, girls, and I keep bringing all these groups in because a lot of us are sidelined because of what is happening in society, and it's important to keep bringing up these groups to ensure that whatever platforms are there that speaks to civic participation, we need to be mentioned. We need to be there. We need to be present and contribute and make sure that we are there until the end. Yeah.
Awesome stuff, Bradley. It's been absolutely great talking to you. I'm hoping and trusting that as we get closer to the 10th, we'll be able to engage again, and of course again on the actual day of World Human Rights. But otherwise, today I think is really a milestone, and especially those people who were behind the campaign. I believe you were actually one of them, pushing for this judgment. Kudos to you. And of course, at the end of the day, I believe LGBTIQ rights are human rights. And all of us deserve to have some.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you to your listeners.
Awesome. Have yourself a good one, all right?
Bye.
And that is how we close it off, as and when I sign out.